Welcome to episode 38 in our series on Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's The Path of the Just, and we are up to chapter 22, the virtue of humility, and we are going to start the second half of this chapter. Obviously the first half was dealt with in the last episode, and we are in this episode we're going to deal with the Ramchal is going to analyze the punishment given to those righteous people who attributed their achievements to themselves. So he brings many examples in history, and we are going to find this is almost like a case for being humble, and how we can be proved that all our great ancestors had this character traits in abundance. So he's going to start with bringing Nehemiah ben Chachaliah. And so who was this man? Nehemiah, the son of Chachaliah, was appointed as the governor of Israel by the Persian king Darius during the beginning of the Second Temple period. He was instrumental in rebuilding the defences of Jerusalem and the surrounding area, and provided much-needed stability and management to the fledgling Jewish community who had just returned there from Babylon. So the Ramchal is going to bring examples of how, when we do perform great acts for the community or by ourselves, that we have to temper our pride with a bit of humility. We can be inwardly proud of what we've done, but to be outwardly proud is perhaps not the best example to show. And in this second half of this chapter 22, the Ramchal is going to bring many cases from all walks of the history to prove this point to us. So the Ramchal begins. We have already seen outstandingly pious people who, despite all of their piety, were punished for crediting themselves for their achievements. For example, our sages of blessed memory, in reference to Nehemiah ben Chachaliah, said, and he quotes from Sanhedrin 93b, "Why was his book not referred to by his name? Because he took the credit himself." Similarly, Chizkiyahu said, and he quotes from Yeshayahu 38 verse 17, "Regarding the lack of peace, it was very bitter for me. For the Holy One, blessed be He, had answered him," and he quotes from Yeshayahu 37:35, "And I will protect the city to redeem it for my sake and for the sake of David my servant." And as they of blessed memory commented on this, Barachot 10b, "Whoever credits himself for his achievements will find them being attributed to others." You see from here that one should not take credit for good acts, and in particular, one should not become conceited and arrogant on account of them. All of this, however, is only relevant for one who is capable of internalizing, someone who will be like Avraham, Moshe, and David, and all the other pious individuals we had mentioned. Yet we, orphans born of orphans, have no need for all of this, for we carry within us so many faults that it does not take great analysis to perceive how lowly we are, and all of our wisdom is like nothing, for our greatest of sages cannot be regarded as anything other than a disciple of the disciples of former generations. This is very important to understand and be cognizant of, as it will prevent our hearts from swelling needlessly. Rather, we must recognize that our understanding is superficial, that our minds are extremely weak, that ignorance is widespread amongst us, that error is multiplying, and that the knowledge that we do possess is minuscule. Therefore, conceit is surely out of place. Instead, what is called for is shame and lowliness. This is obvious. Now the Ramchal is going to describe 4 categories of humility and their relation to a person's deeds. So the Ramchal continues. So far we have discussed humility in relation to one's thoughts. Now we will discuss humility in relation to one's deeds. This subject has 4 parts to it: conducting oneself in a lowly manner, bearing disparagement, being averse to positions of authority and fleeing from honor, and respecting others. The first category, conducting oneself in a lowly manner. The first of these, conducting oneself in a lowly manner, relates to one's manner of speech, his physical bearing, his place within the community, and all of his movements. And he describes how in speech we must conduct ourselves. The Ramchal continues, in relation to one's manner of speech, the sages of blessed memory have said, and he quotes from Yoma 86a, one should always speak softly to people. And this is explicitly stated in Scripture in Ecclesiastes 9 verse 17. The words of the wise spoken softly are accepted, for one's words must have dignity and not be disparaging. Similarly, it says in Proverbs 11:12, one who disgraces his fellow is heartless. And it also says in Proverbs 18 verse 3, when the wicked comes in, with him comes disgrace. And now the Ramchal is going to describe how in one's physical bearing one must show humility. So the Ramchal continues. In relation to a person's physical bearing, they said, and he quotes from Sanhedrin 88b, they sent from there, referring to Eretz Israel, who will merit the world to come? One who is humble, whose knee is lowly, and who is bent over when he enters and bent over when he leaves. And he should not walk erect, nor walk too formally, taking small steps, but rather as one who is going about his affairs. Similarly, they of blessed memory said, and he quotes from Brachot 43b, whoever walks erect is regarded as if he were pressing upon the feet of the divine presence. And it also states from Yeshayahu chapter 10 verse 33, those of elevated stature will be cut down. Now the Ramchal will describe how even one should sit, in what position, in where in the, if you are attending a function or attending a synagogue, where you should sit. You should perhaps avoid the typical places of honor. So the Ramchal continues, regarding his place within the community, he should associate with those who conduct themselves in a lowly manner, and not with those who conduct themselves in an exalted manner. This is also explicitly stated in Scripture. He quotes from Proverbs 25 verse 6. Do not glorify yourself before a king, and in the place of prominent people do not stand. For it is better to be told, move upward, than to be humiliated before the nobleman, as your own eyes have seen. Similarly, our sages of blessed memory have said in Vayikra Rabbah, chapter 1 verse 5, distance yourself 2 or 3 seats from where you should be sitting, and remain there until you are told, move forward. And do not move forward on your own, lest you be told, move back, referring to one who belittles himself. They of blessed memory have said in Bava Metzia 85b, anyone who belittles himself in this world for the sake of the words of Torah will become great in the world to come. And in reference to this, they said, and he quotes from Yalkut Shimoni on Yecheskel 361, remove the turban and lift the crown. That's from Yecheskel 21 verse 31. Means that whoever is great in this world will be small in the world to come. And conversely, anyone who is small in this world is destined for greatness in the world to come. And they have also said in Sota 5a, one should always learn from the wisdom of his master, for the Holy One, blessed be he, bypassed all the mountains and hills and chose Mount Sinai as the place of dwelling for the divine presence, because of its lowliness. Similarly, they said in Rosh Hashanah 17b, for the remnant of his inheritance, that's from Micha 7:18, refers to one who treats himself like leftovers. Now the Ramchal is going to describe the second of these 4 categories, bearing disparagement. So the Ramchal continues. The second category of humility in relation to one's deeds is that of bearing disparagement. Our sages of blessed memory explicitly said, and he quotes from Rosh Hashanah 17a, Whose transgression does he, referring to God, pardon? That of the one who overlooks the sin that another has committed against him. They also said in Shabbos 88b, in reference to those who are insulted and do not respond with insult, who hear abuse directed at themselves and do not respond, Scripture states, and he quotes from Shoftim 5 verse 31, those who love the Eternal will be like the emerging of the sun in all its glory. And now the Ramchal is going to bring a story, the episode of Bava ben Buta. So the Ramchal continues. And they recounted some of the great humility of Bava ben Buta in the following words, and he quotes from Nedorim 66b. There was a Babylonian who came to live in Eretz Israel and got married there. One day he told his wife, cook for me 2 talfei, which are the feet of a cow. Misunderstanding the Babylonian Aramaic dialect that he used, Rashi, this is what Rashi commented, she cooked 2 talfei, 2 lentils. He became enraged. The next day he told her, cook me a huge amount. He assumed that if he told her 2 again, she would cook the same amount as on the previous day. And by exaggerating, he would at least get a normal portion. That's commented by Rashi. She went and cooked a huge amount for him. He then said, bring me 2 butzinei, which are watermelons, I guess, in Aramaic. And she, again misunderstanding the dialect, brought him 2 earthenware oil lamps. In his anger, he said to her, go and break them on the Raishai Bahava, the top of the gate post. Bava ben Buta was sitting in the judgment at the time, and she went and broke the oil lamps over his head, since she thought Raishai de Bahava meant the head of Bahava. Bava ben Buta asked her, what have you done? She replied, that's what my husband commanded me to do. He then said, since you have fulfilled the will of your husband so faithfully, the divine presence will bring forth from you 2 sons like Bava ben Buta. And now the Ramchal is going to bring the story of the humility of Hillel and Rabbi Abahu. He continues, and in reference to Hillel, when telling of his great humility in Shabbos 30b, they said, the rabbis taught one should always be as humble as Hillel, and Rabbi Abahu, with all his humility, still did not find himself worthy of being called humble. And this is what they said in Sota 48. Rabbi Abahu said, I used to consider myself a humble person. Then I saw Rabbi Abba from Akko publicly explaining something, only to have his interpreter explain it differently, and he did not show any anger. I said to myself, I am not a humble person. Now the Ramchal is going to describe the third of these 4 categories, being averse to positions of authority and fleeing from honor. So the Ramchal continues. Being averse to positions of authority and fleeing from honor are spelled out in the Mishnah. This is from Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 1, verse 10, and I quote, love labor and be averse to the positions of authority. And they also said in Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 4, Mishnah 7, one whose heart swells when making halakhic decisions is a wicked and arrogant fool. And they said also, based on Eruvin 13b, one who pursues honor will find that honor escapes him. And they also said, and he quotes from Pesikta Rabasi 22 verse 4, do not be quick to enter into controversy. That's from Proverbs 25:8, meaning one should never run to assume a position of authority. Why? Lest you will not know what to do in the end. For on the next day they will come to you with all their questions, and how will you answer them? And from the same source, and I quote, Rabbi Menachama said in the name of Rabbi Tanchum, whoever accepts a position of authority for his own benefit is no different from the adulterer who derives pleasure from the body of a woman. And from the same source, Rabbi Abahu said, God says, I am called holy. if you find that you lack any of the attributes that I possess, do not take on a position of authority. And the disciples of Rabban Gamliel will bear this out. Although they were in dire financial need, they refused positions of authority, as related in the portion dealing with the Kohen Mashuach, the anointed priest, and he quotes this from Chorias 10a. Do you think that I'm giving you positions of authority? I'm giving you servitude. I believe that this was when the Kohen Mashuach, the anointed priest, thought that they were being given high positions of authority, but ultimately you're serving the community, so you're actually a servant of the community. And he continues, and they also said in Pesachim 87b, how lamentable is a position of authority, for it buries its occupants. From where do we know this? From Yosef, who ruled with authority and thereby died earlier than his brothers. That's from Barachos 55a. So sometimes having a position of authority may seem great from the outside, but it could be a poisoned chalice once you achieve the position or attain the position, because now you have tremendous responsibility and there's no fun. Perhaps the fun doesn't exist, or the pride doesn't really compare to the responsibility of this new role that you have perhaps attained without thinking. And now the Ramchal is going to describe the responsibility of communal leaders. So he continues, in summation, a position of authority is nothing less than a great burden mounted on the shoulders of the one who is carrying it. As long as one is merely an individual living amongst his people and mingling with other individuals, he is only responsible for himself or his own deeds. Yet, once he is raised to a position of authority and power, he becomes responsible for everyone who is under his rule and dominion, because it is his duty to oversee all of them, to guide them towards knowledge and understanding, and to steer their deeds along the right path. But if that ideal is not achieved, the sages applied the words Ve'ashamam b'roshechem, and their guilt is on your heads. That's from Devarim Rabbah, chapter 1, verse 10. This phrase derives from Devarim, chapter 1, verse 13. Ve'asimem b'roshechem, and I appointed them as leaders over you. Now the Ramchal is going to describe how to relate to honor. So the Ramchal continues, as for honor, it is no more than the greatest of vanities, leading a person away from himself and from his master, and causing him to totally disregard his duty. One who is cognizant of this will surely spurn and despise it, and the praises that people give him will weigh heavily upon him, for when he sees how they amplify their praises for what in reality he does not possess, he will feel only shame and will sigh over the fact that he not only has to contend with his own misfortune or his lack of these virtues, but also with the false praise that people heap upon him, which further adds to his shame. The fourth category involves respecting all people, as we have been taught in Pirkei Avos, or Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 4, Mishnah 1. Who is respected? One who respects other people. And they also said, and he quotes from Pesachim 113b, from where do we know that one must respect a peer, even if one knows that his peer is greater than him in only a single matter? And now, the Ramchal is going to describe something very interesting, very important, and a beautiful point that was brought by Rambam in his Hilchat Dayat in Mishnah Torah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's manner of greeting people. The Ramchal continues, furthermore, we have been taught in Pirkei Avos chapter 4, Mishnah 15, one should always be the first to greet others. They said about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that no one, even a Gentile in the marketplace, ever preceded him with a greeting. That's from Brachot 17a. One's obligation to respect his peers relates to speech and deeds. And the sages of blessed memory have already given an account in Yevamot 62b of the 24,000 disciples of Rabbi Akiva who died as a result of the disrespectful manner they adopted towards one another. Just as disgrace is something that is associated with the wicked, as stated in the verse mentioned previously in Mishlei, when the wicked comes in, with him comes disgrace. In a corresponding way, respect is associated with the righteous. Honor resides within them and will not depart them. And it says in Yeshayahu 24 verse 23, before his elders there is honor. The central components of humility have now been defined. Their specific details, like all specific classifications that broaden according to the nature of the subject and conditions of time and place, can be dealt with according to this formula. And he quotes from Proverbs 1 verse 5, let the wise man listen and add insight. It is certain that humility removes many obstacles from man's path and draws him closer to many good things, for a person who possesses humility will have minimal concern for this world and will thereby not be envious of its vanities. Furthermore, his company is very pleasant and people approve of him. It is obvious that such a person will be brought neither to anger nor arguments. Rather, all that he does is done quietly and calmly. Fortunate is the person who has the privilege to acquire this virtue. Our sages of blessed memory have already stated in Yerushalmi Shabbos 1:3, just as wisdom made a wreath for its head, humility made a heel for its soul. The entire expanse of wisdom cannot compare with it. This is clear-cut. It, in that quote, refers to the fear of the eternal. The intent of this passage is to teach us that while wisdom is merely an ornament that enhances the virtue of fearing God, humility is a foundation upon which one acquires fear of the eternal. That's an analysis from Choban Ha'eda. And that concludes this chapter 22 of the virtue of humility. So we've been taught a lot in this part of the just, but it seems like the icing on the cake is to subdue our pride and maintain humility in every situation. Ramchal has described so many social settings and examples of how we should remain humble. If you are confident in yourself, you don't need to be arrogant and haughty. You know that this inner strength that is God within you is enough to feel satisfied and not have to crave people's attention or to describe your deeds. It's enough that God is cognizant of everything that you do. And very, very worthwhile episode. And the next episode, chapter 23, we're going to deal with the how we acquire this trait of humility.